and CBS Radio News, Chattanooga's news, talk, and sports leader.
News Talk 1240.
The prospect of hacking planes is one that's actually really exciting to me. So it's turning out that a researcher, the FBI has discovered, managed to hack into a plane via a breakout box that was on the underneath his seat. He plugged in a modified RJ45 plug, which is a aka Ethernet jack, into the port that was on this box underneath his seat, and through that he allegedly managed to get into several flight control systems, one of which was the thrust control. So he managed to make the plane climb just a little bit, according to the allegations anyway. That's what he's claiming, and that's what some other people are claiming. I have my reservations about it. I'm not entirely sure if he was able to hack into a plane in the way that he's describing. Well, this is Digital Drive. I'm your host, Russell. We're talking about technology and quite a bit more. And something that, for full disclosure, I should note that I have terrible allergies today because I was vacuuming. I decided to tidy up a little bit around the office. We've been doing construction, you may have heard. And if you've been hearing pounding through our broadcast, that would be why, because there's a lot of construction going on. And in my vacuuming, I managed to kick up a lot of sawdust. So now I have but one orifice through which to breathe, which is my mouth. So things might sound a little bit odd. That's why, because I'm all puffy now. Like my eyes are all puffed out, and I don't look very good. So don't look at me, please. You can, though, if you want to. Go to YouTube and search for Hot News Talk Radio, and you can see me blowing my nose and turning off the microphone, and you can see my puffy eyes and my hair, which is in bad need of a haircut, which is what I'm going to be doing this evening. But anyway, an alleged plane hacker said that he pierced Boeing's jet firewall in 2012 as well. So 2012 is 3 years ago, and I know that's shocking even to me. But a youngin', but 2012 was actually 3 years ago, and apparently this went undiscovered for about that long, about 3 years. More than 2 years before coming under FBI questioning about possibly hacking into the in-flight entertainment system of a commercial plane while it was in midair, a security researcher told peers that he accessed the computer controls of other highly sensitive aviation and aeronautics systems, including the International Space Station. Well, that's quite a hefty claim, claiming that he got into the computer controls of the International Space Station. That's both a hefty claim and also kind of funny, but it gets worse. Chris Roberts is one of the world's one of World's Labs. Chris Roberts of One World Labs, there we go, told an audience in 2012 that he bypassed the onboard firewall of a Boeing 737 plane that he was traveling on, and he made contact with an Apache Tomcat web server with the firewall that the firewall was protecting. He told the same audience that he accessed communication systems that NASA uses to control the International Space Station and changed the temperature. It was impossible to confirm the veracity of those claims, which went largely unnoticed until Friday, when an FBI search warrant application came to light, alleging that Roberts told agents that he took control of a jet plane and briefly caused it to climb and fly sideways. Now, my question would be, if you've done all these things, why are you telling anybody? Why are you telling anyone that you've done that? You know, like, it seems like at that point, if you've done something so hugely, possibly illegal as that, why in the world would you tell anybody, right? I mean, we have all done illegal things. I'm sure at some point, come on, we were all young. We've done illegal things at some point. I did something illegal not too long ago, actually, and even filmed it. But, I mean, come on, man. Big deal, right? Like, you'd think that this is something that you wouldn't really tell anybody, right? I mean, we've all done silly little illegal things. Maybe you smoked weed at one point in your life. Big deal, right? Maybe you skateboarded downtown at one point in your life. Big deal, right? Maybe you hacked into an airplane at one point in your life. Big deal, right? Well, okay. That one is kind of a big deal. But either way, that's even more incentive to not tell anybody. So I guess my tip to you, potential criminal, is don't tell anybody if you commit a crime. Good Lord. I mean, as long as nobody else is hurt, who cares, right? So just don't tell anybody. I don't know why people keep doing that, and that just drives me nuts. So they're like, I'm so guilty, I have to tell people so I can go to jail for a long time. You know, it's just silly. Well, the 2012 talk that's titled By Land, by Sea, by Air has already touched off howls of protest of some researchers who say even the passive accessing of restricted parts of a plane while it's in flight is grossly reckless. No kidding. Critics also argue the behavior would likely be a violation of the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, which makes it a felony to gain unauthorized access to protected computer systems. Meaning that had the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act not passed, this would actually not be a crime at all, which I think is kind of funny. Not that I'm a arguer for the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. I think it's really stupid, actually. The Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, it seems like raises way more problems than it solves. I just don't like the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. It just seems silly to me. It's all about it's a lot of the time it's about the accessing of unauthorized, which can actually sometimes, even if you have access to those systems legitimately, they can still get onto you. And it just drives me crazy how they do that. Well, anyway, the talk also generated a vigorous debate among security professionals about whether it's technically possible to carry out the hacks that are described in Roberts' presentation and in interrogations with the FBI agents. Now, here's where I start to have a problem, because he says that he did these things, right? He claims that he hacked into the airplane, he changed the telemetry or whatever. Okay, but I don't really see how that's possible. For one, I mean, I see how it's possible, but I kind of doubt that he was able to do that. But then again, I'm not really surprised by much of anything these days. So maybe he did actually hack into the plane and change the flight controls. I don't know. But it seems unlikely that he would lie to the FBI about doing something illegal, especially since he probably knows that it may or may not have been a violation of the CFA. So, or Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, by the way, the CFAA, I think is what they're calling it. But I just don't see why he would lie about that. Now, he may have, I don't know. But it seems unlikely that you would lie to the FBI about committing a crime. Like, I can totally understand lying to the FBI about not committing a crime. But lying to the FBI, saying and claiming that you did commit a crime, seems kind of unlikely. I mean, sure, maybe crazy people do that who want to go to jail, because better benefits or what have you. There are actually people who want to go to jail. I can understand that. But he doesn't seem to be that sort of person. He doesn't really seem to be crazy. Roberts actually seems to be a person who's of sound mind, although a little bit reckless, perhaps, with his dealings. But anyway, well, for the past half decade or so, Roberts has belonged to this latter group of researchers who say that firewalls and other intrusion prevention systems aren't significantly or sufficiently tightened down. So he claims that there's not a tightening down of these computer systems that are supposed to be protecting us. So he's in his own little way, he's actually trying to protect us by showing these vulnerabilities, which is a little bit weird, but Roberts believes this. Apparently, he has publicly complained that airline manufacturers and the hundreds of partners these manufacturers rely on for various hardware and software components have failed to fix serious vulnerabilities that he has privately reported. Among other things, he has said, it's possible for passengers to use specially equipped laptops to access onboard network known as the IntelliBus system, named after the manufacturer who makes it. Now, I don't know if that's wireless or wired, the IntelliBus system. I'm not too privy with airplane stuff. I'll freely admit that. I'm not too privy when it comes to the flight control systems of airplanes. I've never actually flown on a commercial flight. I've flown on a private flight a few times, or once, I should say, but not a commercial. Never flown commercial. Not that I don't like flying. I think it's a lot of fun. But I've never flown commercial. I've just never had any reason to. I don't really travel that much. And the one time I did, I needed a passport that I couldn't afford. So we decided to go by road instead. So it was cheaper anyway. But beginning around the 18-minute mark in a video, Roberts discusses the ability to use the VxWorks real-time operating system to tap the programming interfaces that developers use to access an aircraft's IntelliBus network. So he claims that it can be done. You can hack into the IntelliBus network on certain planes, which is the network that the manufacturer uses. And it's said that it's possible for passengers to make specially equipped laptops to access this onboard network. Now, the IntelliBus system, I'm pretty sure is not really that much used, if that makes any sense. Like, it's not an extremely crucial system, but it's one that you definitely don't want people getting into. Right now, this is not a case of somebody hacking into a government system to get important information. Right, like that's something that I will readily defend. It's more a case of this could actually really put people in danger, and I'm not sure if I can condone that. But I'll add a but to the end of that, as most things have them. There is an important thing that should be noted, okay? When we're talking about computer security, risks have to be taken to discover vulnerabilities, right? So this guy claims that he's warned the different airlines, I suppose Boeing, the manufacturer, he's warned them about this problem for quite a while. That's what he's claiming. So if the only way to get this problem fixed is to make a big deal out of it, and then that gets it fixed, then I can sort of see where he's coming from. Now, I don't think he went about this the right way, but I can see where he's coming from, where he got into the system and said, look, it's this easy, and he does it. I can see where he's coming from here, but I'm not sure if I condone his methodology. His methodology seems a little bit flawed, seems a little bit reckless, but I can understand it. So people are kind of making a bigger deal out of this than it really is. I mean, I heard about it on the news the other day, just like I said you would, actually. I heard about this on the news when I was at my computer at home, and there was some TV news channel, I don't recall which one, is a local, was on in the background. And they were talking about how an FBI informant claims that he hacked into 10 planes. I was like, that's not at all what happened, actually. But yeah, I mean, the news likes to really just mess things up when it comes to details. I don't like to do that. When it comes to the news, I like to deliver it as factually as possible. If there's a story that I don't understand, I actually research it and try to understand it as best I can, especially if there's some weird, confusing details that they throw in there. I try to figure it out as best I can so you're as informed as I am, because that's really end goal for me, is for everyone to be as well informed as I like to think I am. Because a lot of people, it seems, don't know a lot of things that are extremely basic, and I'm just baffled by it. It's not really the fault of them. It's not the fault of the individual, because individuals tend to be very intelligent. Humans as a group tend to be very stupid, but individuals tend to be quite smart. And it's astounding to me how little so many individuals know, despite being incredibly intelligent. It's baffling to me sometimes. But anyway, this is Hot News Talk Radio, AM 1240. We are everywhere. Listen live to Hot News Talk Radio at hotnewstalkradio.com. Download the TuneIn Radio app and search for Hot News Talk Radio. Hot News Talk Radio is also on Twitter, where you report the world of science. That's AM 1240, Hot News Talk Radio. And you can save half off now. Go to hotnewstalkradio.com. Click on the half off link for great deals. Hot News Talk Radio saves you money. That's AM 1240, Hot News Talk Radio. And we have a lot of great programming here on Hot News Talk Radio. When I came in here, the microphone was set for somebody who is much shorter than me. Now, he may be short in stature. He's not very short in temper, which I appreciate. And he's definitely not short in the ideas department. His name is Tex, and he has a show called Cowboy Up with Tex. And it's on from 6 to 7 every weekday right here on Hot News Talk Radio. That's Cowboy Up with Tex. He talks about the day's events, as he says, and he rounds them up on the weekend as well with his weekend roundup every Thursday. So be sure to tune in on Thursdays here on Hot News Talk Radio, where he rounds up the weekend for you. So there's a lot going on in the local area and in the national sector, and he's, I'm sure, going to be talking about that quite a lot here on Hot News Talk Radio. We also have Imus in the Morning, who's been in the radio business for as long as I've been alive, which is not that long, but it's a long time. Laura Ingram is also on Hot News Talk Radio. She's a former attorney. She may still be licensed, not sure, but she used to practice law, I know. Very intelligent lady. She used to work with the Reagan administration way back in the day, and she's been interviewing a lot of presidential candidates. On Tuesdays, we have Real Estate University right here on Hot News Talk Radio from 11 to noon, where Eric and John talk about the real estate and real estate investment market. My show is Digital Drive, where we talk about talk radio. No, we talk we talk about the tech sector and quite a bit more on Digital Drive. And of course, we had Nuganomics with David Toulis, where he talks about local economy and free markets, and it's very Nuga-centric right here on Hot News Talk Radio. Of course, we have Sean Hannity as well, where he's been interviewing actually a lot more presidential candidates. He interviewed Jeb Bush. It was decent. He interviewed, what's the guy's name? He talked to Lindsey Graham not too long ago, too. I don't think he talked to him after he announced his his run for presidential election. That's not going to go anywhere, by the way. It's really funny to me to look at the presidential election from a Facebook standpoint. Now, what do I mean by a Facebook standpoint? Well, Facebook has changed a lot of things, actually, when it comes to public opinion. Social media in general, but mainly Facebook has changed a lot of things when it comes to how we think. I don't really give much stock to presidential elections. Full disclosure, I don't really care about the presidential election. It doesn't make any difference to me. I don't think much of anything's going to change because most everything is left up to agencies and to boards and to Congress and to state legislature and all that sort of thing. So the office of president doesn't really matter that much, and that's by design anyway. It's not really supposed to matter that much. So I don't particularly care who is president now or tomorrow or whatever. I don't think things are going to much change. After all, if you look at trends and you look at how the nation is moving as a whole, things don't really change from one president to the next. Like, look at the national debt. Like, the national debt goes down, 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 and then you have a series of presidents that goes up, up, up. And this series of presidents is both Republican and Democrat from both parties, different personalities. Under Reagan, the national debt started to climb, especially with Vietnam, the national debt started to climb. I know Reagan and Vietnam don't overlap. I know. And then getting into the first Gulf War and the second Gulf War, and now into this administration, the national debt just starts moving exponentially. But the trends didn't start here, right? It's just continued spending. And the president can't really stop that continued spending anyway. So it seems like a lot of undue blame gets put on the president. I understand that the president is not the best president ever. I don't like any president anyway, so it doesn't really matter to me. But something that I think is funny about the Facebook generation, my generation actually, is we don't care about we're very non-caring about politics, but not in the way you would think. Okay, I don't care about politics, but I care about issues. You see, there's a difference. Politics, I think, are a complete waste of time. Politics are not worth your time, but issues are very important. Okay, does that make any sense? Like, okay, as an example, I think abortion is a very important topic, but it's not really a political issue for me. Like, abortion is not really a political issue because it's more of a legal problem where, like, it's not legal. It's illegal. Abortion is not legal. So it should be more of a question of why are we not enforcing the law properly, as opposed to why don't we get some guy in office so he can sign more laws. More laws aren't going to solve anything. That's why I don't put much stock in politics, because politics is always about making more laws, or if we just get these laws done right, it's more laws are not going to fix anything. Like, we're talking about like the border as another example. People want so much to be done with the border. We want to do this or that with the border. You can't really do much with the border, though, because Congress doesn't have power to enforce the border. Nobody does, actually. They have power to enforce naturalization, but that has nothing at all to do with how people get over the border, you see. So it's like, it doesn't matter. And I don't really care one way or the other if people come over the border or not. So that's another issue. But it's really silly to me how much people care about these sorts of things, and then they always want to raise taxes. Whether they realize it or not, people always want to raise taxes, and that's kind of the silly thing to me, where people talk about, I want to lower taxes, but I also want more benefits to go to veterans. I was like, it's one or the other, dude. You're gonna have to either raise taxes or you're going to have to cut benefits. It's like, it's one or the other. You can't do both. And it doesn't seem that people really understand that. They're like, where's the money going to come from unless you raise taxes? Of course, my solution is just stop taxing people and let people go about commerce the way they're supposed to. And then much of our problems will be solved actually that way. But I'm kind of crazy. My philosophy is very non-aggression. And I don't see most people's philosophy as being that way, especially in the party system. What does this have to do with technology? Well, actually quite a lot, because technology is changing how we think. It's actually changing how the younger generations are thinking, because we have more access to more people. We have more access to more information. We're actually, in a lot of ways, we're much better educated than previous generations were. Not in the same way, though, if that makes any sense. Now, we're not educated in the same way as in book smarts, but we're educated in a much more applied way. Like, we can think about things for ourselves in the sense that I want to know about something, I'm going to look it up with this infinite repository of information called the internet, right? I want to know about what so-and-so wrote about some political philosophy, so I just look it up on the internet, and now I know everything I need to know about it without ever having to go to a library. It's not to say I'm not reading books, it's just I'm not reading them in paper and hardback. It's not how I do it. I just read about philosophy and politics and such online. I don't read as many books, if that makes any sense. Like, I don't actually own that many physical books, but I read a lot. It's really weird. I probably should own more physical books. I recognize that. I really should own more physical books. But one, I'm not very rich, and books are kind of expensive when it comes right down to it. Two, I probably will be buying books later. And three, I just don't see the need for it, and I don't have the space for it at this point in time. That's another factor, is space. I keep hearing from so many people, you can never have a library that's too big, and I completely agree. But I think a lot of it can be held on flash drives and not on physical copies. Not that there's anything wrong with physical copies. It's just a difference in mentality. There's nothing, I don't think either one is wrong or right. It's just the same goal carried about a different way, and neither one harms anybody. So it's completely different. But anyway, this is Digital Drive. I'm your host, Russell, the show where we talk about quite a bit of technology and a lot more. We're going to be talking about generational shifts and how Facebook is really affecting that, actually, how we're thinking. Our brains are not the same as they were 20 years ago. We are not thinking the same way. We are actually much more INTP and much less whatever the opposite of INTP is. We're going to talk about that right here on Digital Drive.
This is a mob mode. This is the mob mode. What kind of fool do you think I am? You think I know nothing of
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
Hi, this is your computer speaking. I don't feel so well. It's like I've come down with a bug, and I'm getting slower.
Affordable Computers. We fix sick computers. Your hometown guys at Affordable Computers will repair your PC in half the time of the big boys at an affordable price. No tricks, no gimmicks, no computer speak technobabble. Just good, quick, and courteous affordable service and repairs. Want to affordably supercharge your PC? Affordable Computers on Highway 58. Affordable Computers hand builds all desktops in-house. If you're looking for a better-than-new refurb laptop, $150 will get you a Dell or another name brand at Affordable Computers. Affordable Computers, Highway 58, between Arby's and Taco Bell. Also Fort O, Battlefield Parkway near Holcombs. Affordable Computers, we service what we sell. Call 499-1975. That's 499-1975.
Wow, this is amazing. I'm feeling great, supercharged.
Do you feel better outside your home or business than in? Indoor air quality is important. Mildew, mold, smoke, water, and rodent damage are prime causes of poor indoor air quality. Ducts, Indoor Air Professionals, better known as Duct Busters, cleans HVAC systems using 127 definable Duct Busters steps. Let Mark Thompson address the indoor air quality at your business to help reduce employee illnesses. Prevent fires by cleaning your dryer vents. Mark and his parents, Dick and Joan Thompson, have been building our local economy and helping local people with HVAC systems 16 years. Ducts, Indoor Air Professionals. Call 876-9907. 876-9907. Ducks. Call now.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
You love your hometown. Are you interested in free markets, in local economy? Do you hope that Chattanooga can survive the next meltdown, the next chain of disasters in the national economy? What's the best way to live out the ideals of self-government and self-determination? Join me, David Toulis, weekdays 1 to 3.
Host News Talk 1240.
Love your neighbor, buy local.
Host News Talk 1240.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
Fox News Radio. I'm Lillian Wu. Police in Waco, Texas, extra vigilant after violent clashes between motorcycle gangs, which left 9 bikers dead Sunday.
There have been credible, reliable threats towards law enforcement in and around our area. I will tell you those have toned down a bit over the past 24 hours. We are absolutely thankful of that.
Police Department spokesperson Patrick Swanton, the president just this morning signing into law a measure to create a nationwide alert system to help catch anyone who hurts, kills, or makes credible threats against police officers. The bill named for 2 New York City officers who were shot in Brooklyn and killed just before Christmas. And Grammy winner Sam Smith's vocal cord surgery successful. That, according to Mass General, which says the 23-year-old is expected to make a full recovery. Fox News, we report, you decide.
The human population has shifted around quite a bit to the point where we are not actually thinking the same way that we were. In that, I mean, like, our brain structures are not the same way as they were. And it's a very odd occurrence. that you would not expect out of a population which really hasn't changed that much. It's weird how we've actually changed a lot just in the last 10, 15 years. We've seen such an exponential shift. Maybe I think it to be more prominent because I've been here to witness it, but hear me out here. So what we have now is a sort of a paradigm shift where technology is really taking off in the terms of computer technology, where it didn't really matter that much in the 60s and 70s. Computers were more of a novelty to your average person, although very important to large companies. They were more of a novelty for your average guy, right? Like your next door neighbor probably didn't care that much that he had an Altair, the old computer that Bill Gates decided to code a basic interpreter for. He probably doesn't care that much about that and thinks that you just have a weird hobby. And computers have become so much less of a weird hobby and so much more mainstream because it really does matter now. Computers really do matter a whole lot to your average population now, much more so than they did before. And that's what's really strange to me, how computers have gone from this really sort of nerdy thing to very mainstream. Although if you're into computers, you're still seen as very nerdy. It's really funny how these things are working out. Okay, so in the 1980s, personal computers started to be really a big thing. Now, we had personal computers in the mid to late 70s, don't get me wrong, but it wasn't until the later 80s, or sorry, the early to mid 80s that personal computers really started to be used by people and not education. You had absolutely the Apple II was in schools by the late 70s, but it wasn't really in people's houses because they were still kind of expensive. Okay, fast forward to the mid 80s where most people are starting to get computers now. You have the IBM PC, you have even Apple is coming out with Apple computers. By 1984, you had the Macintosh, which was probably on every rich business person's desk. And then by the early 90s, almost everyone now has a computer. Mid 90s, nearly everybody has a computer. Late 90s, it's weird if you don't have a computer. And now it's like, why don't you have a computer? Everyone has a personal computer nowadays, or they have a smartphone. And that's where things start to get weird, is now smartphones are becoming what the personal computer was in the early 90s, where at first it's, a few people have them and they're hobbyists and they're sort of a novelty. Now almost everybody has them. And people look at you weird if you don't have one. And it seems like it's sort of replacing the personal computer in a lot of ways because the mobile phone is really replacing a lot of the functionality of laptops and desktop computers for your average person. Now, I still need a desktop computer and a laptop computer because I do a lot of different work that requires it. I do audio editing. I do all sorts of things that is in video editing even as well. That's in image editing that you can't do on a smartphone yet or a tablet yet. So it's still necessary for me, but it's actually not for so many people. And as that functionality increases and starts to become more convenient than the desktop and laptop options, people are going to be more looking at smartphones as their primary mode of communication and connectivity. And it's a very weird shift for me because this is only now happening in the last few years. This is a much faster evolution than we had with computers. I mean, personal computers, where it took maybe 15 years for complete adoption of the personal computer. And it's taking much less time now with the smartphone. Smartphones didn't really come out. I mean, I know there were computers or smartphones before 2007, but the iPhone kind of kick-started things and made them popular because the iPhone was hip and trendy and all the kids wanted the iPhones, So everyone got an iPhone, and then people started getting the Samsung Galaxy phones, and now almost everybody has a smartphone of some sort. I have a Lenovo because I'm contrarian, but it's a really good phone. And it was inexpensive. It's a quad-core, 1 gigabyte of RAM. You can't go wrong, really. Probably going to be upgrading soon, though. But it's just weird, the quick adoption rate. Like not even 5 years later, or not even 10 years later, I should say, and everyone has a smartphone. That's just such a bizarre shift to me. That's just before 10 years. Nearly everybody has one of these devices. Well, people are not thinking the same way that we used to. We as a population, we as a race, as a species perhaps, we're not really thinking the same way that we used to because our brains have actually shifted around quite a lot in recent years. You see, according to some new research, I suppose, it's turning out that we are much less Zen-like. We are much more prone to anxiety, as I can tell you firsthand, but we're much more efficient and we think better in terms of calculation. So according to Gizmag, we're much less zen, but we're much more efficient, and how the digital age is actually affecting our brains. So a comprehensive Microsoft study is offering insights into how living in the digital age is affecting our ability to sustain attention and how our brains are adapting to constant flow of new stimuli. Although the results confirm the suspicions that the information overflow is affecting our ability to focus on one task for long periods of time, the news isn't all bad, as it seems that we're also training our brains to multitask more effectively. I can give you a good example right now. I came into the office and I made food for myself for breakfast because I come in really early. So I was making my breakfast and I was boiling water in the microwave because it's just faster. It's in a ceramic mug. Don't worry, it's fine. I was boiling water in the microwave, and I went to do that, and then I went to check on the news on my computer, and I also put some music on, and I completely forgot about what was in the microwave. But then I get up, and I don't know why I stood up, but I stood up and walked over to the microwave without even thinking of it, and I got there right as the timer went off. And I noticed that I do that a lot, and I'm not consciously doing it. So I just sort of know when a timer is going to go off. I'm multitasking and not even thinking about it. And that doesn't make me special because I know a lot of other people do that. I have many friends who do that. For instance, I was at my friend's house, and we were all at the oven when he was turning the timer on for some chicken, I believe that was in the oven. It doesn't really matter what was in it. But we all saw the timer being set, and we were all sitting in his living room watching a movie. And almost at exactly the same time, we all stood up at the same time, and the timer went off. Like, as soon as we stood up, the timer went off. Now, we stood up before that timer went off. I can tell you that firsthand. So we were all sort of connected in that weird way where we're having a much better sense of time, and we're subconsciously multitasking. Like, we're putting tasks sort of on the mental back burner, but it's still processing there. It's a background process, but it is there, and we're becoming much better at that. So when the dinner guest of Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh, I think I pronounced that right, pardon me if I didn't, offered to wash the dishes before enjoying some tea together, the master asked his guest if he truly knew how to wash dishes. Said the master, there are two ways of doing so: washing the dishes in order to enjoy a cup of tea later on, and washing the dishes in order to wash the dishes. If one washes the dishes the first way to enjoy the tea later on, then he also won't be able to enjoy the tea, as his mind will again be solely preoccupied with what comes next. But in the second way, even the simplest of tasks becomes enjoyable. You see, it's that wanting to do something because you're doing it that makes things enjoyable for a lot of people. And we're actually sort of losing that, where we're focusing on one task at a time. We're not doing that nearly as much as we were. Now we're much more focused on multiple things all at the same time, be it our taxes while we're driving, be it our sports team, our favorite sports team while we're thinking about our accounts. All sorts of different things are really affecting how we're operating as a people. So at first, it would be sensible to assume that the never-ending flow of stimuli is actually hurting our attention spans as we quickly become accustomed to switching from watching TV, multi-tabbing on our internet browsers, and tinkering with our smartphones in a constant addictive search for the next dopamine hit, which actually you do get. Browsing the internet actually does affect your dopamine levels, which is the same thing as doing cocaine. Actually, not nearly as big a rush, but dopamine is what's affected by doing cocaine or doing other opioids. It actually affects your dopamine receptors and causes them to trigger, causes them to fire, which makes it addictive. And that's why the internet is actually sort of an addictive thing, because you do get an increase in dopamine by using the internet in certain ways. So that's why the internet is such an addictive thing, and that's why we want to constantly use it. It's very weird. Well, a comprehensive study by Microsoft revealed that things aren't quite as black and white. Attention cannot be reduced to a single figure because different tasks require different types of attention. The Microsoft study distinguished between three types of attention: sustained, meaning maintaining the prolonged focus during repetitive activities; selective, which is avoiding distraction, and alternating, which is efficiently switching between tasks. And they set out to understand how factors such as social media usage and multi-screening behavior affected different types of attention. So Microsoft has figured out how to manipulate our attention in a much better way, and I'm sure Windows 10 is designed around that. But it's an interesting little tidbit about how our brains work. We're becoming much more multitasked, and we're much less single focus, unless we're playing video games. That's one exception, actually, and that's why playing video games is actually good for you, because it makes you focus on one thing. Now, if you're going to be multitasking, the best way to multitask is to actually take drugs. Now, I don't mean taking drugs like meth. I mean taking drugs like caffeine. Drinking coffee is not only good for you, it puts caffeine in your system, which is also semi good for you, depending on how much. And it also does help you concentrate on certain tasks and multitasks, so you become a more efficient worker. That's why coffee usage is often encouraged in different offices. And I'm not going to argue with it. I love coffee. It's a very addictive thing, but it's also very good, and it doesn't really hurt you, and it's actually good for you. So who knows? Go figure. It's kind of like nicotine. Nicotine is actually good for you in a lot of different ways. So actually, you could argue smoking, say, pure tobacco would actually be good for you because you're getting nicotine and you're not actually harming your body in limited doses. It's abuse of that starts to become a problem. A lot of people don't have that self-control where they can't not abuse it. They can't help but abuse abuse nicotine. I tend to have that self-control, so I have partaken in the fun of nicotine without, it's been like several months now since I last did, but I did notice an increase in productivity, which I thought was really interesting. So I'm next paycheck, I'm going to be investing in nicotine patches so I can work better here. No, I'm kidding. Well, an engineered virus is protecting bacteria while eliminating antibiotic resistance. So genetic engineering is something that's very troublesome to a lot of people. It's a very odd thing to think about, people actually engineering things genetically. It's a very bizarre thought. And this is AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio. We're everywhere. You can listen live to Hot News Talk Radio at hotnewstalkradio.com. Download the TuneIn Radio app and search for Hot News Talk Radio. Hot News Talk Radio is on Twitter, where you report the world of sides. It's AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio. You can save half off now. Go to hotnewstalkradio.com. Click on the half off link for great deals. Hot News Talk Radio saves you money. That's AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio. So keep that in mind. Hot News Talk Radio, we are here for you. We are always with you on the go. And on the Hot News Talk Radio website, we have a Jeep Grand Cherokee for $3,500, which is actually half off, 50% off of the Jeep Grand Cherokee. Can't really go wrong with that. I mean, who wouldn't want a vehicle for half off? Can't go wrong. We have a lot of wonderful programming here on Hot News Talk Radio meant to tickle your brain. We have Imus in the morning from 6 to 9. We have Laura Ingram. On Tuesdays, we have Real Estate University, where Eric and John talk about the local real estate and real estate investment markets. Digital Drive is my show. We're talking about technology and quite a bit more. Duganomics.com with David Toulis. He talks about local economy and free markets in a very Nuga-centric way. Sean Hannity's on. He's been interviewing a lot of presidential candidates. Very interesting. Hot News Now is on every weekday from 5 to 6, where we talk about the local news and traffic and weather. Traffic comes from Hot News Now, which is a service of our good buddy Mike Wood over at the Traffic Center. Sean Hannity's on again after that, after Cowboy Up with Tex, which is on from 6 to 7, where Tex talks about the day's events. Very, very useful show. Very interesting. Well, Title II is something that some people are worried about. I being one of them, actually. Title II is what the FCC is trying to push. AT&T's CEO is not too worried about it, though, because he is confident. Randall Stephenson is the CEO of AT&T, the American Telephone and Telegraph Company, and he's confident that Title II is going to be overturned by courts or Congress, and I actually share that sentiment. Title II is not something that I think is going to last any time at all. Somebody's going to challenge it, and net neutrality is going to be thrown out the door. But until that time, AT&T CEO Randall Stephenson last November claimed that he would pause the company's fiber instruments because of the impending broadband reclassification and imposition of net neutrality rules. He says, we can't go out and invest that kind of money deploying fiber to 100 cities, not knowing under what rules those investments will be governed, Stephenson said at the time. But now that the Federal Communications Commission has reclassified broadband providers as common carriers and used its Title II authority to impose net neutrality rules, Stephenson says that AT&T is confident that it can keep investing. It's not because AT&T agrees with Title II. It's actually that the company has sued to overturn them. Instead, Stephenson said that he's very confident that either the courts or Congress will overturn or heavily alter the FCC's decision on net neutrality. Now, note that net neutrality was not necessarily a democratically voted on thing. Now, I don't think democracy really exists that much here in the States. It's more, I mean, I know it's a representative democracy, but it seems that it doesn't really reflect what a proper democracy should be. So we're not really seeing that a whole lot because we don't really have a whole lot of say in what goes on in Congress. Like, for instance, most of us are very much against the NSA spying, right? Like, we could pretty accurately say that we're against NSA spying. And yet, for some odd reason, this is almost a non-issue in Congress because they're willing to pass NSA spy bills with no problem. So it's no wonder that people are disenfranchised with the whole system of democracy, because it's not really democracy. People are confused into thinking that what we have now is a democratic system when it's really not. It's really a shame that the system has been so screwed up, but it's also not really surprised, because any sort of governmental system is going to become terribly corrupt after some period of time, and we have gotten to that point. In fact, I thought it was really funny. I was watching Jeopardy the other day, and Zachary Quinto was on Jeopardy, and he's a guy who played Spock in the new Star Trek movies. I'm a little bit of a fan. He seems like a pretty cool guy. And he was asked if he would enter a political career by Alex Trebek. You know how he sort of does a little bit of a short overview of their personality after the first break in the show. And he asked Zachary Quinto if he would be interested in a political career because he has been a little bit politically involved. And he said, paraphrasing a little bit, but he said, no, because I think the system is just too broken to get into. And I thought that was really funny that aired on national TV. You know, here it is on ABC. He's this guy talking about how the national system just doesn't work. And I thought that was very funny. But I'm also grateful that we can say these things on national TV. So it's not as bad as you might think. You know, I mean, the governmental system is terrible and it's oppressive and it's awful, but we still can say these things without worrying about guys in black coats walking into our houses and shooting us in our beds. You know, Zachary Quinto doesn't really have a whole lot to worry about in terms of that. So we do have that to be thankful for sure. Well, net neutrality is bothering a lot of people, the AT&T CEO being one of them. He said, the exact comment I made was, we're going to put a pause on our new broadband deployment plans until we see how these new rules come out, said Stevenson in an interview with CNBC. He said, we have seen how those rules came out. As we read those rules, we do believe that they're subject to modification by the courts and remand by the courts to the FCC. Because the net neutrality rules as they exist right now are not entirely legal, and they make a very, very big assumption, which is that the FCC somehow has jurisdiction over the internet, and I'm not sure how they can claim that. The internet is very much nationless. It's not an American thing. It's not a thing that any government can claim. The internet is very much a personless thing. It's a nationless entity because it interconnects, I'm pretty sure, every country on Earth, actually. I'm not aware of a country that doesn't have internet access, although there may very well be one. It does interconnect us in a very important way, a way that is not easily achieved by any other medium of connectivity. And we really can't claim jurisdiction over it. That's a very, very offensive thing, actually. It's a very presumptuous thing that the FCC did, saying that we have jurisdiction over the internet. And I'm not sure how we can claim that. We can't even really claim jurisdiction over the internet in the homeland, because it's not really owned by the country. That's kind of the silly thing. We keep seeing this where the government places, say, prices on cigarettes. How do they do that? You know, the cigarettes are not owned by the United States government. They're produced by different companies. You know, they're produced by, big tobacco. So shouldn't the prices be set by the companies in the stores which sell them? You know, they talk about how now stores are allowed to sell them at a certain rate. Well, wouldn't they be allowed to do that anyway? And it's sort of the same thing we're seeing with the internet. In fact, it's exactly the same thing we're seeing with the internet, where people are kind of hoping that the internet is as highly regulated as cigarettes are or as alcohol is. And it's not a comparable thing. It's unfortunate because we have so many people backing this idea, not really knowing what would come of it. And very well-meaning people, very well-intentioned people who truly believe that net neutrality is a solution to the problem of corruption within the ISPs, but it's really not. The solution to problem within the ISPs is enough people complaining that things change. If enough people voted with their wallets, then things would change pretty drastically, much for the better, I would argue as well. Instead of asking the government to do it for us, we're asking the government to be a broker between us and the ISPs, and that's really not the way to go about it, because we really don't want the government to be involved in business. Anytime they get involved in business, things go bad. Think about how heavily involved the Republican Party was with Enron, and look how badly that went. Now look at how BP has gotten so much help from many governments, and look how badly things have ended up with them. You see, so government really, we don't want them involved in business because they don't solve any problems. Government only creates problems and creates laws and rules and regulations that only hamper business, hamper small business. There are definitely laws in place that prefer big business over small, And that's not a free market system. Their laws should not be biased towards any business at all, because that's not a free market system. We do not have a true free market mainstream here in the States. We can't, because there's government involvement in the markets. It just can't work that way. We're talking about what a great and free market that we have here, but that's not really true. And if you say that, that's a very offensive thing to so many people. They say, how dare you ever say that? We are the most free nation on earth. Well, if we are, I really hate to see what it's like for the other guys, because we aren't that free in a lot of regards. Or perhaps it's not that we are not free, it's that we don't exercise our freedoms properly. Because something that I think needs to be pointed out is that our freedoms don't go away, right? Like if I have a right to free speech, which I do, and somebody says that I can't say something, well, I can still. I'm not outside of my rights to say this thing. It's just that they don't want me to. It's that they're trying to oppress me. It's not that I don't still have the right to say it. Okay, for instance, if it's made illegal to question or to criticize the government, let's just assume that, okay? Do I not have the right to criticize the government? Well, of course I do. I always do. But they're claiming that I don't. That right doesn't disappear suddenly. If rights were as fickle as that, we may as well not have them in the first place. And that's something that so many people, especially in the Tea Party patriot community, don't understand, is that they can't take away our rights. And I hate it when people say that. They're trying to take away our rights. They can't do that. They probably know they can't do that too. You can't take away somebody's rights, but you can oppress them to the point where they believe they don't even have them in the first place. So that's a very big problem that we have here in the States, but we still have our rights regardless of what they say. They can pass unconstitutional laws all day, but that doesn't change that we still have a right to these things. Okay, for instance, they make guns illegal. They can just make firearms flat out illegal. Let's assume that they do. Firearms are now illegal to own, all of them. If it's for sporting use, it's for hunting, for home protection, doesn't matter. Firearms are now illegal. Do you still have a right to own your firearm? Well, of course you do. Nobody's going to argue with that. Well, of course, people in government would, but I wouldn't. Of course, you have a right to own that firearm. You should own that firearm. Now that they've passed these laws, you definitely should own that firearm. So I'm not sure how the argument can be made that they're taking away your right, because to say that is really to give much more credence to them than you should. To say that they're taking away our rights is giving them way more credit than anyone ever should, because they can't possibly do that. It's way too much of a bureaucratic process anyway, and they're falling apart at the seams as it is now. If there's going to be some sort of armed rebellion by the government against the people, it's going to be a very lackluster one. It's going to be a very boring one, because there's going to be so much bureaucratic interruption that it's not really going to be very efficient anyway. So there's not really a whole lot to fear on that end. Well, this is Digital Drive. I'm your host, Russell Lee Show. We talk about technology and more. Nuganomics.com with David Toulis is coming up in just a few seconds right here on Hot News Talk Radio.
This is a mob mode. This is the mob mode.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
Surgery does not have to be financially painful. Hi, I'm Surgical Dr. David Red, and I'd like to invite you to my walk-in surgery clinic in North Shore. Quick Surge brings you immediate relief from moles, skin tags, maybe a laceration. Quick Surge. You walk in, fill out a mini form, I numb the area I'll treat, and before you know it, you're on your way home. Do I take insurance? No, because I take cash customers. I have super low and fixed prices, credit card, check, or cash. Uninsured, member of the working financially disadvantaged, choose Quick Surge. I publish prices online. No murk, just sunshine.